Our journey begins at the ancient town of Molfetta, which has a history stretching back to the 10th century. At Alberobello are hundreds of remarkable dome buildings called trulli, which are examples of Italian folk architecture. Crossing the foot of Italy, we come to the dramatic Sila National Park, which was established in 1997. Turning north and overlooking the Amalfi coastline is the city of Salerno, which had been conquered by numerous countries until Italian unification in 1871. Continuing north, we come to Pisa and one of the finest architectural complexes in the world, the Square of Miracles, which includes the famous Leaning Tower. Our final location is the small harbour of Portofino, considered one of the most beautiful places on the Italian Riviera. On the coast at Molfetta is the Calderina Watchtower, built in the 16th century as a defence against raids by pirates, Saracens and Turks, and the Spanish. It is one of the best examples of its kind. They were placed in positions where they could maintain visual contact with the next tower, and with a larger castle inland. A fire would be lit on the roof to warn of an approaching enemy. In the next century, the towers were equipped with bells that could be struck with a hammer or martello, leading to the more general name of Martello Towers. The town and port of Molfetta has a long and ancient history stretching back to Neolithic times. The first document that mentions the city was in the 10th century. In the 11th century, the Normans arrived, and the port prospered as an embarkation point for pilgrims heading for the Holy Land, as well as knights joining the Crusades. This prosperity stalled when the Aragonese from Spain arrived and in 1529 sacked the city. Recovery took time, although its fishing fleet helped in rebuilding the economy. Today, Molfetta attracts many tourists who come to enjoy the wealth of its architecture as well as its beaches and seafood. Inland and on the heel of Italy is the town of Alberobello, and from a distance a seemingly typical one with an ancient history. Yet in 1996 it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The reason for this was these remarkable domed buildings called trulli. They represent one of the most extraordinary examples of Italian folk architecture. Their design was intended to fool the authorities and to avoid taxes. The local lord moved his peasant workers here in the 17th century to clear woodland and cultivate the land. To circumvent existing laws and taxes, it was important that Alberobello didn't become permanently inhabited, so the people had to live in trulli, which were originally farm buildings, which were temporary and could be dismantled in a hurry if necessary. Eventually, the town was given official status, and so the trulli could become permanent. Alberobello is known as the capital of the trulli. Here, each house is a different shape and size, and are sometimes combined in a complex of communicating houses, while others are built on 2 levels. Almost all feature a grey, cone-shaped roof. The structure assures excellent indoor climate control, cool in summer, and warm in winter. In the surrounding landscape, trulli are still being built for storage, and happily stand alongside others which date back centuries. One of the most important cities in this part of Italy is Lecce, which, like so many other places, has a history stretching back to pre-Roman times. However, Lecce's great days were in the 17th century, and its legacy of fine Baroque buildings. Indeed, it was known as the Florence of the South. Its spider-like web of streets opening up from squares and piazzas offer the visitor beautiful views along streets with very different styles of buildings. Most of Lecce has been built of Lecce stone, a particular kind of limestone and one of the city's main exports. It's prized as a building material because it is very soft and workable. This also makes the stone suitable for sculptures. After the fall of Rome, the city fell to the Normans, the Sicilians, and then the Spanish, who in the 16th century built the impressive castle to protect Lecce from the Ottoman Empire in the east. Like so many other cities, the past often gets buried, as new buildings are built over the old. In the city's centre, only part of the 2nd century Roman amphitheatre, built under the direction of the Emperor Hadrian, has survived. It was once able to seat more than 25,000 people. Even though it is now seemingly cut in half, it is still used for all sorts of events and performances. With a lack of an airfield in this part of Italy, we have arranged to refuel from a local farmer who operates a small heliport for passing rotary aircraft. Refueled, we can continue on our journey along the coast and discover this region's ancient Greek and Roman past. Centuries before the Romans colonized this part of Italy, it had been lived in by the Greeks, and much of their culture was taken up by the Romans. Here, near Metaponto, are fragments of this ancient Greek past. This is the remains of the 6th century BC temple of Hera. Originally, the temple had 32 Doric limestone columns, but only 15 of them remain. They are Metaponto's most impressive site. They're also known as the Palatine Tables, since knights or paladins are said to have gathered here before heading to the Crusades in the 11th and 12th centuries. The temple was initially attributed to the cult of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. But when a fragment of a vase, found during the archaeological excavations of 1926, a ritual dedication was found to Hera, the goddess of women, family, and marriage. In 1961, the temple was carefully restored. Close by is the Greek city of Metapontum, which was probably founded around the 7th century BC and was an important city in what was known as Magna Graecia, or Great Greece. This was the city where Pythagoras, the Greek philosopher and mathematician, died around 500 BC. However, in the 3rd century, the city's prosperity was about to change, as like most of the Greek colonies, they eyed the expansion of Rome with considerable unease. Thus, when Hannibal invaded, its citizens quickly succumbed to the temptation to embrace him as a savior. Metapontum welcomed Hannibal's army, who used it as a base for his invasion of Italy and Rome, in what became known as the Second Punic War. After their disastrous defeat by Roman forces at the Battle of Metaurus, the Carthaginians were forced to withdraw from Metapontum and also most of the inhabitants, in order to save them from the vengeance of Rome. The city then fades into almost complete obscurity until centuries later it was discovered and gradually excavated and protected, including the theatre, the huge columns of the Temple of Apollo, the Agora or Market Square, a Roman fort, and several other temples. Today, it is an archaeological park and open to the public. As the sun begins to set, we cross the Gulf of Taranto and enter the region of Calabria at the town of Rossano, where the old town sits on a small plateau overlooking the sea and the newer town below. Rossano is a small ancient town which over the centuries has seen a raft of different countries and dynasties controlling it, from the Romans, the Goths, the Byzantines, the Normans, the Hohenstaufen from Germany, the kings of Naples and Spain, two noble Italian families, finally becoming part of a new unified Italian republic in the mid-19th century. During its changing and troubled history, Rossano has produced two popes. With the light fading, we head west across the toe of Italy, towards the coast and Eufemia Airport. On the way, we fly over the Sila National Park, which was established in 1997 and covers around 75,000 hectares, including one side of Sasita Lake, or reservoir, which was created in 1951 to bring much-needed water to local farmers. As we descend towards the coast, a large bank of low cloud has built up against the mountains, which has created a dramatic sight with the setting sun. Luckily, the clouds have gaps in them, so we can see the ground below and carefully descend towards the approach to Lamezia Terme International Airport. With the growth of air travel, as well as tourism in the region of Calabria, it was decided to build a new airport near the coastal motorway. Lamezia Terme Airport opened in 1976 and today handles around 2.5 million passengers from across Europe. Most of them are holidaymakers. All along the coast, in the Calabria and Campania regions, are small towns and villages which overlook the Tyrrhenian Sea. Once fishing villages, they now cater for the influx of tourists. This is Campora San Giovanni and Corca. And as we look along the coast, the mountains slope down to the sea, dividing many small resorts. Also along the coast are hilltop villages in the mountains, some perch precariously on rocky outcrops, but with outstanding views out to sea. And some will look down on Cape Palinuro, where under its limestone cliffs and in hidden bays there are a series of spectacular caves. As we head north up the coast, we pass the city of Salerno, overlooking the high mountains of the beautiful Amalfi Coast. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Salerno, like many other Italian cities, was conquered by numerous countries and later ruled by powerful families until Italian unification was completed in 1871. In the following century, it was the scene of Operation Avalanche and the invasion of Italy by Allied forces in 1943, and for a few months became the provisional seat of government for the Kingdom of Italy. Today, Salerno is a modern, thriving city, attracting thousands of tourists for both its high life and its history, which includes one little-known historical fact, that in the 9th century, Salerno was the first place in Western Europe to found a medical school. We now enter the region of Tuscany, which has roughly 250 kilometers of coastline, which is known as the Etruscan coast for the number of sites left by this ancient civilization. Halfway along it is the major seaport of Livorno, and the third largest port in Italy, which also attracts large cruise ships with thousands of passengers disembarking for trips to cities such as Florence and Siena. Livorno's growth began back in 1571 when Tuscany's Grand Duke Cosimo had his architects transform a small fishing port into an ideal Renaissance city, which in the 17th century was given free port status, thus ensuring its fortune for centuries as a thriving international trading centre. However, this success as a major port led to catastrophe during the Second World War, when the city suffered extensive damage from Allied bombing raids as they fought to dislodge the Germans and their supply line. As a result, fine buildings, including the cathedral, were destroyed. About 10 kilometres up the coast is the small seaside resort of Marina di Pisa. It was largely developed in the late 19th century when holidaying at the seaside became fashionable. The town was further enlarged in the 1930s. It lies on the south bank of the River Arno, one of the most important rivers of central Italy after the Tiber. It flows for 241 kilometres and passes through Florence and Pisa, which is our next location. At the mouth of the river is a trabucco, a traditional fishing machine. Its origins are still not entirely known, but it certainly originates from within Mediterranean culture and could well go back centuries. The net is lowered into the flowing water to a depth of around 15 metres when fish swim up the coast. It is then raised up again and the fish scooped out. Straddling the River Arno is the city of Pisa. By the 11th century, it had grown into a powerful seafaring nation as one of the four main historical maritime republics of Italy. At that time, the city was also a very important commercial centre, as it controlled a significant Mediterranean merchant fleet and navy. As a result of this economic success, vast riches flowed into the city, and this wealth was to create one of the finest architectural complexes in the world, the Piazza dei Miracoli, or Square of Miracles. It is perhaps best known around the world for the famous Leaning Tower. But the other buildings are just as important. The square is owned by the Catholic Church and is considered a sacred site. There are four great religious structures: the cathedral, the campanile or bell tower, the baptistry, and the Campo Santo. The Campo Santo, or Holy Field, is an oblong Gothic walled cemetery, said to have been built around a shipload of sacred soil from the Holy Land, brought back here from the Crusades by the Archbishop of Pisa in the 12th century. Every year, over 1 million visitors travel from across the world to visit these remarkable buildings and marvel at their age and beauty. The baptistry, dedicated to St. John the Baptist, stands opposite the west end of the cathedral. The round Romanesque building was begun in the mid-12th century. It is the largest baptistry in Italy, and the building is just short of the height of the Leaning Tower. The construction was not finished until the 14th century, when the top story and the dome were added in a Gothic style. The main building is the cathedral, dedicated to St. Mary of the Assumption. Its construction began in 1063 and set the model for what has become known as the Pisan Romanesque style of architecture. In the same year, St. Mark's Basilica began its reconstruction in Venice, evidence of a strong rivalry between the two maritime republics to see which would create the most beautiful and luxurious place of worship. The construction of the bell tower, now known as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, was begun in 1173 and took place in 3 stages over the course of nearly 2 centuries. 5 years after building started, when the tower had reached the 3rd floor level, the weak subsoil and poor foundation led to its sinking on its south side. The building was then left for a century, which allowed the subsoil to stabilize itself and prevented the building from collapsing. When construction resumed, the upper floors were built, with one side taller than the other, giving it a curve at the top. By the time the building was completed, the lean was approximately 1 degree, or 80 centimetres from vertical. In 1990, the lean measured approximately 5.5 degrees, so to avoid a potential collapse, the tower was stabilised in the late 20th century, and as a result, the tilt was reduced by 1.5 degrees. When visitors climb the tower, they have the strange sensation of going down as well as up as they walk around each level. The importance of the Square of Miracles was recognised in 1987 when it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Italy has had a fine reputation for boat building for centuries, and at Viareggio is a shipyard that has been in the same family for nearly 200 years. It was in 1825 that Giovanni Battista Codicasa and his family started building fishing boats, sailing ships, gunboats, and barges. In the 1970s, they branched out into luxury motor yachts and now have a worldwide reputation for steel and light alloy ships, from 30 to 70 meters in length. Today, each boat is designed to the buyer's specifications, and the cost can run into many millions of dollars. Indeed, a recent 30-year-old 34-meter yacht was for sale at just under $19 million. Only the seriously rich can afford to buy a boat like this, and then, of course, pay for a crew and running costs, which will total around $1 million a year. As we continue up the Italian Riviera and past long golden beaches and resorts, the mountains can be seen a few kilometers inland. And it is in these mountains that some of the most sought-after metamorphic rock is found, better known as marble. These are the Carrara marble quarries, named after the nearby town. It was the ancient Romans who first used this flawless limestone to build lasting monuments such as the Pantheon in Rome. Over the following millennia, the marble was so intensely extracted from over 650 quarries that the area has produced more stone than any other area on Earth, and it's still exported around the world today. The most prized grade of Carrara marble was the pure white marble known as statuario, which was favoured by artists and architects during the Renaissance, including Michelangelo, who used it for his statue of David. But by the beginning of the 20th century, it had completely run out. Back on the coast and across a small bay is our last location, and perhaps one of the most beautiful places on the Italian Riviera, Portofino. This ancient fishing village is an Italian gem long frequented by prominent personalities from the worlds of entertainment, culture and finance. Its popularity can be seen in the cruise ships anchored offshore. The passengers come to see the brightly coloured houses lining the harbour and inlet, with other villas dotted around the rocky promontories. The whole place seems rather like a glamorous film set, and indeed, Universal Studios theme park in Orlando have rebuilt it, complete with its harbour as a hotel. Yet Portofino has, like so much of Italy, an ancient history stretching back to Roman times. Pliny the Elder referred to it as Port of the Dolphin, which later evolved into its current name. It was not until the late 19th century that tourists discovered Portofino, which they had to reach by horse and cart. Eventually, visitors began to stay and build expensive vacation houses, so that by the 1950s, tourism had replaced fishing as the town's chief industry, and the waterfront houses gradually turned into restaurants and cafes. At this time, visitors included Winston Churchill, Rex Harrison, Clark Gable, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, Groucho Marx, and Ava Gardner. They all stayed in the Hotel Splendido, which had originally been a Benedictine monastery, then a private house in the 19th century, before opening as a luxury hotel in 1902. Since 1935, no new houses have been built here, so that Portofino still retains its picturesque charm. It truly is a perfect place to end this journey.